Hello everybody. When last we left off, I was getting the Linux that runs on an LXD container under the Windows subsystem for Linux here on my laptop into parity with a Linux that runs on a container not on my laptop. It runs elsewhere in my home, in the home cloud, and QNAP network attached storage device that also has a little computer. It can host applications. So that's this one here. And they're going to look very similar because I got them mostly into parity yesterday, right? This one here on my actual laptop is about the same as this one here on my QNAP server. But they're not entirely the same. If I were to ls in that directory, there's nothing in my home cloud instance. And if I were to ls here, a bunch of my current repos that I'm working on are actually there because it is my laptop and I map these directories together using symbolic links or whatever other tools of mounting that are at my disposal so that I keep my master files and tools and whatnot and repos in a commonly accessible location. And that's not going to be accessible out here on the cloud. I'm going to have to git clone these various repos from GitHub. Now the problem with doing that is to git clone your own private repos, you need your keys. I don't have my keys here. So if I were to cd ... and ls-la here in the cloud, you'll see no .ssh directory. I could show you that here, but it's really, this is again where these things are out of parity. This actually doesn't need the .ssh because I use it just primarily to host JupterLab here, right? So this is running local so that you can have this going on. Screen ls, list of screens. There's one called Jupyter screen -reattach Jupyter. There's Jupyter server that hosts this Jupyter that I double click and run all the time. It gives you some of that sort of larger context. And we don't need that showing anymore, really, because we're talking about the one in the cloud, which is this one here. And the one in the cloud does not have a .ssh folder. But I do have a data folder. And data folder is nice because that's a cloud thing. So the same way I remap the repo directories and everything so that they're accessible on my various Linuxes and Windows laptop side. Cloud side, I can do similar tricks with a NAS, and the data directory is one of those similar tricks that's taking place with a NAS. So I keep a lot of common tools in there. CD data, that location is actually on this same device that's hosting this machine, but it's a cloud drive. It's a shared Samba protocol drive instead of a Kubernetes-like Linux container host. So it can be used in different ways, and I'm using it two different ways, kind of self-referential here anyway. Inside of there, I can show you the contents there. There's nothing surprising. We can cd into home. Home is where I keep some of my common stuff. ls there. Clear ls-la. You can see in there, there's a .ssh folder, and that's what we're interested in. We cd into the .ssh, and you can see all these nobody, no group permissions. It's because it's the cloud drive and contexts change a bit, file systems. I don't have them all tied together as the same user ID or whatever it would take to have this shown as Ubuntu:/Ubuntu. Same thing with the key files that are actually in here. So I'm not going to bother with permissions here because of the weird context of the cloud drive. I'm just going to CP everything from here into my into a location ~/.ssh. I think that should work. I might have had to have made that directory first, right? Yeah, I do. So cd Oh yeah, I can do it from here. mkdir ~/.ssh. You need to make your SSH location relative to your home directory. And now I can copy all the files from the directory I'm actually CD'd into over to there. And now I'm going to CD to that new location, ~/.ssh ls. And now you can see the files are here as well. Now the good news is their permission context changed. They do belong to Ubuntu, calling Ubuntu group and user, or user and group, something like that. But permissions are probably not correct, because the first thing that goes wrong when you try using keys like this is an error because you don't have the correct read-write permissions. The programs that let you use keys are smart enough to look at whether the keys have been tampered with. So what we do is we chmod, which is the change the file, modify the file bits here. And we use -r for recursive. We don't even need that. It's going to be just everything in this directory. So an asterisk for the files it applies to will suffice. But we will need to give a file mask. This is the equivalent of D's, and of not D's, but R's and W's, a pattern of that. That is the sufficiently locked down amount necessary for keys. And we do that to everything here. Oh, and we're almost certainly going to have to sudo that. All right, and now we just do an ls-la again, and you can see how much more locked down these keys are. They're only read and write by admin, I think. I think it goes admin, group, user, something like that. Admin, user, group, maybe. But these keys now can be used, and so let's use them. cd .. ls cd repos. I'll make it a little bigger, but I now should be able to, well, not entirely. There's a few other things that I should copy just to make it not challenge me. cd .. make the video a little shorter. I am going to copy from data. I just happen to know where these things are inside data home git config to here. So with the git config, that's going to eliminate challenges, or not challenges. The keys eliminates challenges. This is going to eliminate not knowing who we are, prompting us for username, email address, all that kind of stuff. So we go back into repos. Now we can do what I was wanting to do, which is git clone colon git clone colon git clone git at github.com /Mick11, my name, /OAWF, OHAWF. Oh, Git is not even on this this machine yet. So this was created by LXD launch, and that pulls down very bare bones generic Linux machines from Ubuntu, from Canonical, who sponsors the LXD Linux container project. They're so bare bones they don't even have Git. The problem is Git's not there. Sudo apt install Git. Yes. Look, to get Git, you like get Perl and stuff. Like there's a lot of dependencies. All right. Clear. Now I go back to that command git clone. Ah, yeah, so it doesn't have all that known host stuff there and authorized keys and stuff. So you do have to answer yes here. And yeah, all right, it made a change so it won't challenge you for that again. Now if I do an ls here, OAuth, there it is, right? And yeah, so I'll start building up my various libraries I use for things here, and I can run them in the cloud. this is now much more in parity, or able to be in parity, with my local machine, because any repos that I keep, and I might even get GitHub out of the picture in the future. It seems unbelievable to say that, to hear that in your head at this point, that in the future GitHub itself becomes an optional part of a project. But there's no reason with that little NAS over there I couldn't run Jupyter. It's not Jupyter, it's GitLab, and keep all my JupterLab stuff on GitLab and have a whole lot of labs going on. But this is definitely a big step in the direction of breaking your dependencies. So, you've got a local container, you got a remote container in the cloud, even though the cloud is your home and you're not even paying the $20 a month or whatever else they're going to try and extort for you for the privilege of cutting your teeth on these technologies, right? Just do the one-time investment of a NAS, network attached storage, network application server, in your home, and you can start doing tricks like this. So my next video, I'm going to be having something run 24/7 here, but I definitely needed to have Git and the ability to pull repos, clone repos down, because when that project starts, it's going to be starting in Jupyter, right? So here's JupterLab. It's always screen 2 in my arrangement. I'm up to 8 here. I like to keep it at 7. So 7 screens, where screen 2 is always Jupyter. Screen 1, well, it does have terminals in here. These are not the terminals this screen is for. This screen is for this terminal here, which is not a LXD container at all, but it's native WSL. It's a 20.04 Ubuntu directly on WSL, so I can basically do this, which is I keep my journals on all my machines, and I have these scripts now that allow me to do a poll before I start editing. So here I am in my daily journal. &J to start a new journal entry, and hello world. I just did the final step, I hope, did the final step so that my LXD Linux container running in my home cloud, which happens to be a QNAP NAS, right? There's also symbology. There's a few of them. Home cloud. Yeah, I get. What do I say? I guess it's, not my laptop, but still. Yeah, I guess it's those two things, QNAP NAS, which is not my laptop. That's the idea I'm trying to get across. Into parity. That's too technical. You might think there's some communication protocol, just as capable as the ones I'm running directly on my laptop. So LXD Linux containers are now my main vehicle and vessel for, it's the same thing, that's redundant, my main vehicle for development work, expressing myself with technical tools. With infotech tools. Right? That just about gets it, right? There's the reason for those. So the 3 screens, right? So screen 1 is always my journal. Screen 2 is always JupterLab full screen. And screen 3 is always the browser. And that's usually indicated by the arrangement of the icons there. Screens 1, 2, and 3. So we'll bring that up. The reason I had these 2 other icons here was because there used to be like one remote machine I logged into that I kept there. And then the different machines I log in remote, started to vary enough, and I had different scripts to play with enough that I made an other folder. But some things are still too important to be hidden away in other. I want to be able to instantiate these 2 Linux containers really, really easily now. One which is on my laptop, which actually plays host to Jupyter. I think I pointed that out. And the other, which is not on my laptop, which is on a physical piece of hardware elsewhere. Since I have a web browser going, I'll just say QNAP, NAS. I even faxed my model number so you'll see what the device looks like. Go right to the product page from QNAP. I bought this years ago, and it sat really unused in my home for the longest time before I got around to activating it and using it, plugging in the drives and learning enough of the networking and whatever it is, the web user interface, the special software it comes with, the very cPanel-like interface. So, to interact with a device like this, you don't really hook a keyboard and mouse so much. You can, and it even has a monitor port for being a media center host, which is why it has this remote control. But for the most part, I use it for just file storage and the occasional hosting of a machine. When you run code on these things, you generally don't run code on the version of Linux that is actually running directly on the machine, although its apps run in that context. But when you add a accessible service to this, the proper way to do it really is through Container Station. So, I've been learning Container Station. On my QNAP NAS. I've also been learning LXD, which that's based on, which uses the command LXC to do all, which uses the command LXC for everything, except the initialization. There's an initialization command that is an LXD command, but everything after that is really an LXC command. So things get a little bit confusing because that overlaps with naming conventions that used to be around in the past before LXD was on the scene. It was all just called LXC, but LXC no longer is the thing running the show. That D stands for daemon, a Linux service. Linux daemon is running the show, and LXC, the C stands for command. It's the command line interface command that you used to control LXD. So that's the broad context of everything you're seeing me do here right now. And I'm spending a lot of time in tooling, but time in tooling is just about over. I've pivoted to where I need to be to not be clobbered by the proprietary. Proprietariness is trying to kill you, or at least it's trying to empty your wallet. Everyone wants to try and make you dependent on their cloud services. I resist that. I do a lot of types of work that is very difficult to pull off in the cloud. Technically doable, but at the low cost and under the radar way I like to do it, it's easier to just run it local. And sometimes you'll want to automate a script. So this is a little preview of how everything is coming together. The era of tooling is over because I can do stuff in Jupyter that automates the web browser. Maybe, make me eat my words. It's a pretty hefty little bit of lifting it's actually doing here, what it's asking to be done. So I question that whether the screen recording, oh no, there it goes. It launched Chrome. This is Chrome for Linux. It's taking a little bit of time to do the first draw, but you'll see all it's doing is it's bringing up the Google homepage in Chrome for Linux, and that's it. Just brought it up full screen and sits there. But some of the things you'll notice is it's really the Linux version. Look how my pointer changes from the Windows pointer to the Linux pointer. Really, really tiny. I'll have to look into that. And how my login is actually me, both to the browser and to the Google session. It's logged in as one of my Gmail accounts, MikeLevinSEO.com, MikeLevinSEO.com. And I can move that out of the way. You can see that the running is over, and I have closing the browser turned off. There's some sort of message there. Something was never awaited. I do tend to see that message from time to time, both with Microsoft Playwright and Puppeteer. There's something having to do with awaiting things with in non-headless mode. So headless default so that you can really see the browser. Now watch, if I actually close the browser after it's done, I'll do that once more, and then you'll see hands off of this thing. It's the second time it's running, so it should be actually quicker, he says. And there goes Chrome full screen. Chrome for Linux full screen. Linux version of Chrome. Going to Google. And as soon as that page load is done, it's going to close the browser. And there we are back at Jupyter. And it stops executing. And we're using the context manager. So look at this. We're not calling a function, right? So we're using asynchronous mode in a Jupyter notebook to do Chrome browser automation using Microsoft Playwright and not Puppeteer or Puppeteer. And we're using not a Chromium, which is the free and open source version, which is easier to tell it's being automated, yada, yada. I'm actually using a Linux version of Google Chrome. And it's, that's the user data, right? Here's the binary for the Linux Google Chrome. And then here is my user data. So this is how it results in logging in as me through these automated sessions to further make it, believable as a real human there surfing. And so there you have it. I'm going to develop things here. I'm going to use nbdev to turn these into .py files so you can play around with stuff, mock it up, and then whenever you want it ready to test in an automated context, you'll run the nbdev export or whatever it is these days, and that will run in the context of one of these, very server-like, very Linux server-like, because it was born Linux server-like, but you put it into headless mode. Instead of the browser popping up, the browser will not pop up, and then it'll just run here as a py file. It'll be like Python, repo name, file name, .py, right? It'll be something like that. If you're CD'd into the directory, you won't need repo name. It'll just be python.py, and that will be an automatable equivalent of what you just did over here in JupterLab in a notebook, right? Jupyter Notebooks. JupterLab is just a way to run Jupyter Notebooks. And so it'll live over here as a .py file, which is still actually technically on the laptop. And then when I want it in the cloud, I move that same file name .py, probably through a git cloning, over to the extremely similar instance of Linux running over here on my NAS, this device. And so you're doing home cloud development without it even being web development, and nor using any cloud services to speak of. So that's where we're going here. I thought I'd do this nice little video for you to give you a clear idea of what the videos recently have been about. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to subscribe.